The old listening station sat on the edge of a quiet desert, far from any city lights or busy air routes. Most people on Earth had forgotten it even existed. It used to be a major research center decades ago, but now only a small team looked after it, keeping the massive antennas turning, cleaning dust off old panels, and checking signals that almost never meant anything. Most of the time, all they heard was static, soft hissing sounds from the universe, the usual background noise of space that went on day and night. Then, one ordinary morning, something unusual happened. One of the engineers on duty noticed a thin, shaky line appear on the signal screen. At first, he thought it was just interference from a passing satellite or a glitch caused by desert heat. But the line didn't go away. It grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. He leaned closer, tapping the screen gently as if that would explain it. After a moment, he called the others over. When the whole team arrived, the room filled with a tense kind of silence. All eyes were fixed on the tiny blinking pattern that looked like nothing they had ever received before. The signal repeated itself again and again, like someone far away was trying very hard to be heard. They ran it through every filtering tool they had. Old machines hummed, lights flickered, and the main computer processed layers of audio. Slowly, a clearer shape started to form. It was not just noise. It was structured, patterned, intentional. Someone or something was sending a message across space. The team exchanged unsure looks. Earth hadn't received a clear alien signal in modern history. There had been rumors and weak detections, but nothing that matched this level of detail. This was different. This was emotional. This was almost desperate. The station's translation software tried to decode the alien language, although it had no prior reference to work with. The program struggled, but after hours of adjustments, small bits of meaning began to break through. It was like picking up scattered words from a person speaking. Through thick fog, the first translated word that made sense was help. Everyone froze. They waited for more fragments, watching the lights blink as the computer worked. Soon, another phrase appeared, danger coming. Then cannot survive. Then anyone. Please respond. The team felt a mix of shock, excitement, and worry. The emotion behind the message was unmistakable. Whoever sent it was frightened, not just by a small problem, but something large enough to send their voice across light years with the last of their strength. The team immediately transferred the message to Earth's Central Space Agency. Within minutes, high-level officials were alerted. Within hours, the entire scientific community was talking about it. And by the end of the day, every major nation had heard the same decoded words. Humanity didn't know who had sent the signal. There was no visual image, no detailed coordinates at first, just a faint direction and distance marker hidden inside the signal's frequency. It came from far beyond any area humans had explored, farther than their colonies, farther than their trade routes. It came from a region many star maps didn't even label clearly. Yet the direction wasn't the surprising part. What shocked everyone was the language inside the message. Even though the translation was incomplete, the tone was unmistakably urgent, almost pleading. Something terrible was happening to an alien world. Something they couldn't fix themselves, and they were calling out to anyone who might hear them, not knowing who would answer. Humanity had always wondered whether there were peaceful civilizations out there. Stories spread through science forums, news channels, and online groups. Soft-spoken species with gentle cultures, plants that glowed softly at night, people who valued harmony over conflict. Many believed such aliens existed somewhere, but never imagined they would be the first to reach out. Yet here they were far away, frightened and running out of time out of all the possible worlds they could have called. Their signal reached Earth. The reactions from the public were mixed. Some people felt excitement at first contact. Others felt fear. But many felt something else responsibility. After all, Earth had faced its own struggles over the centuries. Harsh climates, dangerous wildlife, unpredictable storms, and the never-ending challenge of survival. Humans had grown up on what many other species might consider a difficult world. A place where strength, creativity, and adaptability were essential. Across the galaxy, planets with severe environments were rumored to produce tough, resilient species. A whisper ran through old alien legends. Earth was classified as a death world, a place too dangerous for delicate life forms. Stories said humans had strong bodies, strong minds, and strong wills because they needed them to live on such a rough planet. Most aliens avoided Earth for this reason out of fear. Not malice. So no one expected humans to be the ones responding to a gentle species call for help. Yet deep inside Earth's space agency buildings, teams of scientists and mission planners worked non-stop. They brought up old blueprints, ran new simulations, and activated long unused Starship engines. Questions were tossed around. What kind of danger were the aliens facing? What technology did humans need to bring? How far was the travel? And most importantly, could humanity actually save them? Engineers didn't know all the answers yet, but they knew one thing. They had to try. While the world watched, preparations accelerated. Big cargo ships were loaded with medical pods, water recyclers, habitat tents, emergency food supplies, and all sorts of equipment useful for unknown crises. Smaller, faster scout ships were prepared to fly ahead and gather information. Experienced astronauts, explorers, and scientists volunteered in overwhelming numbers. They didn't know who was crying for help, but they knew why. Their message sounded like a last hope. Late into the night, one of the senior communication officers replayed the alien signal, listening closely. It was hard to tell what the original voice sounded like. It was distorted, stretched, and weakened by distance. But even with all the noise, something in it felt strangely familiar. It wasn't the words, it was the feeling behind them. The feeling of someone who didn't want their world to disappear. This emotion connected deeply with humanity. Every person on Earth understood what it meant to lose something, to fear for the safety of loved ones, to want anyone to come to the rescue. This shared understanding was what finally pushed the mission into full green status. Soon, the coordinates became clearer as more parts of the message were decoded. The signal came from a star system shaped like a soft curve on the star map, a region no human had ever visited. But that didn't stop them. Routes were plotted, fuel tanks filled, engines warmed to a bright humming glow. Humanity wasn't going to wait for more information. They weren't going to hold meetings for weeks or debate endlessly. Someone was crying out in fear. Someone needed help. And that was enough. The launch day arrived quietly. There were no grand celebrations, no fireworks, no loud crowds. Instead, there was a deep, steady focus. The sky was clear, and the early light stretched over the launch platforms as the giant ships prepared for departure. Teams checked their last systems. Pilots sealed their suits. Technicians watched the countdown numbers drop lower and lower. 10 seconds. 5. 3. 2. 1. The engines lit up with a bright, steady flame, and the first rescue vessel rose slowly from the ground. More followed behind it, forming a long line of steel and light. They headed upward through the calm morning sky, breaking through clouds and entering the dark, quiet stretch of space beyond Earth. From the ground, the ships looked tiny small sparks drifting away into an endless ocean. But each spark carried hope, courage, and determination. Humanity didn't know what they would find when they reached the source of the distress call. Maybe the danger was natural. Maybe it was something humans had never seen before. Maybe they were already too late. But none of that stopped them. Far across the galaxy, on a world they had never visited, someone had cried for help, and humans were on their way. The rescue fleet traveled through deep space for many days, moving past silent star fields and drifting dust clouds. Inside the ships, the crew tried to prepare for whatever they might find at the source of the distress signal. Even though they didn't know what kind of aliens were calling for help, they carried medical supplies, shelter units, emergency tools, scanners, and everything they could think of. Still, no amount of planning could calm the nervous excitement inside the ships. Humanity had sent explorers to many strange places before, but this felt different. This time they weren't exploring. They were responding to someone in danger. And the closer they got to the alien system, the stronger that responsibility felt. On the main rescue ship, the crew checked the signal again. As they approached the source, the message became clearer, but also sadder. It carried a soft, trembling tone, like someone speaking while scared and exhausted. The words were still partly broken, but new fragments appeared. Please, anyone, we cannot hold much longer. The crew exchanged worried glances. Whatever was happening out there was still happening, and it was getting worse. As the fleet entered the alien star system, the first view appeared on the observation screens. A soft blue planet floated ahead, glowing gently under the light of its sun. Thin rings circled around it, shimmering like ice threads. At first glance, the world looked peaceful. But the closer the ships came, the more they noticed things that didn't look normal. A faint crackling shimmer surrounded part of the planet, almost like the air itself was being pulled apart. Strange waves rippled through the atmosphere, bending light and causing distortion patterns across the sky. This didn't look like any natural weather or storm humans had ever seen. The fleet slowed down, approaching with caution. Then the first alien ship appeared on the radar small, round and moving very unsteadily, as if its engines were about to fail. It wasn't flying toward the humans. It was drifting, like it no longer had power. The rescue crew opened a communication channel, trying to speak in a calm and friendly tone. They asked if the alien ship needed help. They received no answer, not because the aliens didn't hear them, but because the aliens were too shocked to reply. Inside the small alien ship, gentle beings called Aurelians stared at the human fleet in sheer disbelief. For generations, they had heard stories about Deathworlders, beings from dangerous planets, strong enough to survive storms, harsh climates, and countless natural threats. Most species stayed away from Deathworld planets out of fear. According to the old stories, Deathworlders weren't just tough. They were unpredictable, loud, and capable of surviving things that other species wouldn't even attempt. To the Aurelians, humans looked powerful, tall, and intimidating. Their ships alone looked enormous compared to the small, delicate vessels the Aurelians used. The Aurelians themselves were gentle and lightweight, with soft features and calm energy. They lived on a peaceful world where life moved slowly and harmony was deeply valued. Their planet had never forced them to become physically strong. Their cities were built with thin structures. Their technology designed for beauty and balance rather than extreme conditions. So when they saw a fleet of huge Deathworlder ships entering their sky, they panicked. Inside their drifting vessel, the Aurelians sent a rushed message to their homeworld, their voices trembling. They came, one of them said. The Deathworlders came? This news spread across the Aurelian cities like a spark of fear. People who had been hiding from the strange atmospheric disturbance now whispered anxiously about the new arrival. Many feared that answering their distress call had invited danger instead of help. They worried the humans had arrived to take advantage of their weakness or to claim their world. Meanwhile, the humans had no idea the aliens feared them. On the main ship, the crew detected that the drifting alien vessel was losing power fast. Without delay, they prepared a rescue pod. A small team suited up and flew toward the alien ship. They weren't sure if the aliens would trust them, but they couldn't just watch them fall. When the rescue pod attached to the side of the alien vessel, the Aurelians grew even more frightened. They backed away, unsure if they should hide or run. The door opened slowly, and for a moment, both sides simply stared at each other. The humans didn't rush forward. They didn't raise any tools or weapons. Instead, one of them gently lifted a small white device, a universal translator, and set it on the floor between them, pushing it forward slightly. They stepped back to show they meant no harm. A faint, soft tone played as the translator activated. "Are you hurt?" The device said, repeating the human's words. "We want to help." The Aurelians looked at one another, confusion replacing some of their fear. The voice from the translator wasn't harsh. It was calm, steady, and kind. After a moment, one of the Aurelians stepped closer, speaking in their soft language. The translator struggled for a moment, then translated the words, "You came to help us?" "Yes," the humans responded. "We received your call." The Aurelians didn't know how to react. All their stories said Deathworlders were dangerous. Yet here these humans stood, offering comfort, not threat. It didn't match anything they had imagined. The human team scanned the alien ship gently, checking for any damage or power issues. They explained what they were doing every step of the way. When they discovered the engine was failing, they worked together quickly to stabilize it. The Aurelians watched in amazement. Humans worked with a confidence and speed they had never seen before. Their movements were strong but controlled, focused but gentle. Once the ship was stable, they brought the Aurelians aboard the rescue pod and carried them safely back to the main vessel. The Aurelians expected loud machines and harsh environments inside the human ship. But instead, they found clean hallways, soft lighting, and medical staff ready to help them. Their fear eased further. Meanwhile, the Aurelian homeworld was still struggling with the strange atmospheric distortion. Areas near the energy waves were unstable, buildings shaking even in calm air. The ground vibrated in unpredictable patterns. The aliens were evacuating delicate structures, helping each other move to safer areas. But the damage was growing faster than they could manage. When the humans finally received permission to approach the planet, they sent out small scout ships with scanners to understand what was happening. The Aurelians watched from the ground, nervous and unsure. But the humans didn't act carelessly. They analyzed everything with precision. The scanner teams discovered the cause, a strange gravitational disturbance orbiting dangerously close to the planet, pulling at the atmosphere and crust like invisible fingers. It wasn't attacking the planet, but it was unstable and unpredictable, something the Aurelians had no way to handle. When the humans shared their findings, the Aurelians listened quietly. They didn't interrupt or panic. They simply absorbed the information with wide, anxious eyes. One soft-voiced Aurelian asked, "Can you stop it?" The humans didn't answer immediately. They didn't want to give false hope. But after a moment, one of the lead engineers spoke gently. "We'll try. We won't leave you alone." For the first time since sending the distress signal, the Aurelians felt a small spark of comfort they had feared. Deathworlders. But the humans standing in front of them didn't look like monsters at all. They looked like people who understood hardship, people who refused to walk away from a crisis, people who were determined to help even strangers across the galaxy. The humans noticed something too. The Aurelians weren't hostile, aggressive, or untrusting by nature. They were kind, gentle, and emotional. They moved carefully, spoke softly, and carried an innocent fear that showed they weren't used to danger. They reminded the humans of the more peaceful communities on Earth, people who believed in cooperation and kindness. And so, a silent understanding began to form between the two species. The Aurelians accepted the humans' help, and the humans accepted the responsibility of protecting a world far softer than their own. As the rescue team prepared their plans to approach the gravitational disturbance, Both sides realized something important. The universes they each expected were wrong. The Aurelians expected terrifying Deathworlders. The humans expected mysterious aliens. But what they found was each other. For the next several days, the human rescue fleet stayed in orbit around the Aurelian planet, studying the strange disturbance that was tearing through the atmosphere and the upper layers of the planet's surface. Although the view from space made the world look calm and beautiful, the scanner showed something completely different underneath. Huge waves of invisible force moved across the sky like ripples in water, bending light and shaking entire regions without warning. Inside the main command room of the human ship, the atmosphere was serious. Huge screens showed shifting energy patterns. Lines of data scrolled across panels, and glowing dots marked dangerous zones. The crew tried to understand what they were dealing with. What they found made everyone pause. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't a natural space. Cloud. It wasn't a failing energy shield or anything. Built by the Aurelians. It was something far more unusual. Wandering point of gravity. Small but incredibly dense, orbiting close to the planet like a tiny invisible moon. It wasn't large enough to destroy everything instantly, but it created unpredictable waves of pressure and energy. Each wave pushed the atmosphere and ground differently, causing the strange distortions the Aurelians had been facing. One of the human researchers leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes as she tried to explain it to the team. It behaves like a micro-singularity, she said, but not exactly. It's unstable, almost shaking itself apart. This made everyone concerned. A singularity, no matter how small, was not something any species could ignore. And if it continued to behave unpredictably, it could tear the planet's atmosphere or crust over time. The Aurelians had no chance of stopping something like this. Their technology wasn't built for danger. Their culture had never prepared them for extreme survival situations. They came from a world where harsh events were rare and nature was gentle. Most of their tools were soft energy-based light materials. Smooth designs, delicate structures. The humans, on the other hand, came from a world full of unpredictable weather, shifting grounds, strong storms, and countless natural challenges. They were used to building things meant to survive the worst. They had studied black holes, gravitational distortions, and unstable space phenomena for decades. So the task fell naturally to them. The plan they proposed wasn't simple. It involved using strong fusion-powered anchors, long graviton tethers, and synchronized engine thrust from several ships. The idea was to pull the unstable singularity away from the planet and guide it into a safer orbit far from inhabited areas. When the Aurelians heard this, they were stunned. They asked in soft, shaky voices whether such a plan was possible without great risk. One of the human engineers replied patiently, "It's dangerous, yes, but if we don't try, your planet will continue to suffer. And eventually, the disturbance will become too strong." The Aurelians exchanged nervous looks. They didn't want anyone to be harmed for their sake. Yet they also knew they couldn't stop the gravity point on their own. The humans sensed this hesitation and reassured them gently. "We came because you asked for help," the engineer said. "We won't step back now." But deep inside, every human on the mission understood the danger clearly. If the tethers snapped, if the gravitational force shifted suddenly, or if the engines failed at the wrong moment, the rescue ships could suffer serious damage. Still, none of them suggested turning back. The preparations began immediately. Human crews worked around the clock, assembling massive anchor units outside the main ship. These anchors looked like bright metallic structures, almost like giant hooks attached to thick energy cables. Each cable was designed to withstand enormous gravitational forces. The team tested each one, checked every bolt, and ran countless simulations. The Aurelians watched from a distance, unsure what to feel. Their world was gentle, their people soft-spoken, and danger was rare. It amazed them how humans moved with such purpose, such confidence, almost as if they were used to fighting forces far stronger than themselves. One group of Aurelians gathered near the observation platform, whispering to each other. They noticed how humans didn't panic, even when looking at data that would terrify them. They also noticed how humans supported each other, passing tools, offering advice, checking equipment together. This sense of teamwork was something the Aurelians admired deeply. As the launch of the Graviton anchors approached, the rescue fleet prepared to move into formation. Several ships positioned themselves in a wide circle around the invisible singularity. The tethers would attach to it using specialized gravity stabilizers tools that could link with energy fields rather than physical surfaces. The Aurelians' anxiety grew the closer the operation came to starting. They were afraid for their rescuers. They didn't want harm to come to the people who had come so far to help them. The thought of humans risking their lives for strangers felt overwhelming. One soft-spoken Aurelian managed to ask a human pilot, "Why do you do this?" "Your world is safe. You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." The pilot thought for a moment, then answered in a calm, steady voice. "Because someone asked for help," he said. "And because we know what it's like to face danger alone. We know how it feels to hope someone will come." The Aurelian lowered their eyes, touched by the sincerity of those words. Finally, the operation began. The rescue ships extended their tethers, long streams of shimmering energy reaching toward the unstable gravity point. The humans monitored the readings carefully, adjusting angles, boosting power, and matching frequencies. The instant the first tether locked onto the singularity, every screen on the ship flickered. The room shook slightly. A low hum filled the air. The humans braced themselves and held their positions. The singularity reacted like a wild animal, suddenly held by ropes pulling, twisting, vibrating. Some of the Aurelians watching the process gasped softly and clung to each other. They were afraid the humans might get hurt, that the tether might snap, or that the strange gravity point might destabilize further. But the humans stayed calm. They tightened the anchors. They adjusted the engines. They directed the formation. Bit by bit, they guided the singularity away from the planet, like slowly pushing a massive boulder uphill. The closer it moved toward the safe orbit, the more stable the waves became. The planet's atmosphere calmed. The ground stopped shaking. Cities that had been trembling for days experienced moments of peace. The Aurelians began to realize something surprising. The humans weren't just strong. They weren't just determined. They weren't just capable. They were compassionate. They put themselves between danger and a world that had not even known them before. They acted not like legendary Deathworlders from old stories, but like guardians, like people who understood suffering and refused to ignore it. Slowly, the singularity neared the orbit the humans had chosen. Yet the final part of the task was the hardest. The gravitational forces spiked suddenly, and the ships had to push their engines to limits rarely used. Lights dimmed. Panels shook. Tether stabilizers heated up. On the surface, the Aurelians watched the sky with silent worry. They could see faint flashes from the human ships high above. They could feel every shift in the air as the singularity moved farther away. The humans stayed focused, even as sweat dripped down their faces and alarms beeped in the background. They communicated constantly, making adjustments every second. After a long, exhausting effort, the singularity finally settled into a stable orbit, a safe distance from the Aurelian world. Inside the command room, an exhausted but relieved silence filled the air. Humans leaned back in their seats, breathing deeply, letting the feeling of success wash over them. On the planet below, the Aurelians couldn't hold back their emotions. Many of them cried softly, not from fear, but from relief and gratitude. They realized that the beings they once feared had just saved their entire world. The operation had succeeded, but both humans and Aurelians knew the story wasn't finished. Yet this was only the beginning of something bigger. For a short while after the singularity was moved into a safer orbit, everyone, humans and Aurelians alike, allowed themselves to breathe again. The planet had calmed, the sky had stopped bending unnaturally, and the strange ripples rolling through the ground had faded away. It felt like the worst was over, but space is unpredictable. The humans knew this better than anyone. Although the singularity was now far from the planet, it wasn't stable yet. It still shook slightly, like a spinning top wobbling on a table. If its motion changed too much, it could slip out of orbit and drift toward the world again, undoing everything the humans had worked for. The anchors and tethers had moved it, yes, but they hadn't fully secured it. Inside the main human ship, the engineers stared at new readings with growing concern. One of the graviton tethers was flashing red on the screen. Lines of warning symbols began appearing one after the other. The tether wasn't holding steady. It was losing its connection to the singularity. If that tether failed, the disturbance could return. The room grew tense as the lead engineer explained the problem. The stabilizer on one tether is misaligned, he said. It needs to be manually adjusted. Everyone understood what that meant. The stabilizer was outside the ship, behind the anchor, floating just a short distance from the singularity's orbit. It was in a region filled with shifting gravitational pulls, sharp energy pockets, and unpredictable distortions. Sending someone out there was dangerous. Even with a strong suit, a single wrong step or a tiny miscalculation could fling a person into unstable space. Yet somebody had to go. The crew didn't hesitate. Several volunteers stepped forward almost instantly. There was no dramatic music, no long speeches, no arguments. Humanity had always been like this. When something needed to be done, someone would do it. A group of Aurelians standing near the observation window watched the humans quietly. They saw how quickly the humans prepared, how calmly they accepted the risk, how naturally they moved into action. It wasn't recklessness. It was responsibility. To the gentle Aurelians, this behavior was almost overwhelming. One of them finally spoke in a trembling voice. "You are risking yourselves." For us, a human technician nodded with a small smile. Your world needed help. That's all that matters. Aurelian eyes filled with emotion. They had never been a species used to danger. They built their homes with soft materials, decorated their cities with glowing gardens, and lived peaceful lives. To them, the idea of stepping into harm's way deliberately was almost unthinkable, but the humans didn't treat it like a sacrifice. They treated it as a duty they willingly carried. Preparations for the repair began quickly. 3 engineers suited up, each wearing advanced protective gear designed for high-gravity environments. Their suits were bulkier than normal spacesuits, with reinforced joints and thick plating. They activated stabilizing boots and magnetic locks. Their helmets glowed faintly with HUD screens, showing readings of gravitational shifts. Before stepping into the airlock, one of them spoke quietly to the Aurelians, watching from behind the glass. "Don't worry," he said. "We've handled rough space conditions before." But even as he spoke calmly, the Aurelians felt their hearts twist. They didn't know how humans could stay so composed in situations that would terrify others. The airlock opened, and the 3 engineers floated out, moving slowly across the outside of the ship. The only sounds they heard inside their helmets were their own breathing and the faint hum of suit engines adjusting to each gravitational wave. Below them, the planet shined like a blue jewel. Above them, the singularity pulsed softly, like a small black spark surrounded by swirling energy. It was beautiful, in a dangerous way. The damaged stabilizer was not far, but the path wasn't simple. The engineers had to move along the anchor beam, stopping often to steady themselves whenever the gravitational shifts grew too strong. Each shift felt like a tug from an invisible hand pulling sharply, then easing suddenly. Inside the human ship, the control team monitored their vitals carefully. Every small fluctuation made someone hold their breath. The Aurelians had gathered in the command center, unable to look away. Their world had seen long periods of harmony and art, but moments like this were new to them. They were watching people fight against nature itself, and doing it with quiet determination. Halfway across the anchor beam, a sudden gravitational wave struck. The beam jerked violently. One engineer lost grip and floated upward suddenly. The Aurelians gasped from behind the glass. But the engineer remained calm, activating the emergency tether on his suit. A thin white cable shot out and locked onto the anchor. He pulled himself back toward the beam and continued without hesitation. The Aurelians whispered to each other in disbelief. How could anyone remain so unshaken? Finally, the team reached the damaged stabilizer. The small device was shaking, its energy pattern flickering like a dying flame. The humans needed to recalibrate it manually and re-secure its lock onto the singularity surface. They worked quickly. One engineer held the stabilizer in place while another reconnected its cables. The third stabilized their position, using handheld thrusters to keep everyone balanced against the shifting gravity dot. It was delicate work, far harder than it seemed. Each time they steadied the stabilizer, a new wave shook it loose again. The engineers communicated in short, calm phrases, adjusting every second. Inside the ship, the Aurelians watched each movement anxiously, their soft hands pressed against the glass. Some held onto each other's arms, their eyes wide with worry. They couldn't understand how humans kept their composure while standing next to something capable of tearing space apart. After several long minutes, the stabilizer finally clicked into place, but just as they secured it, the singularity pulsed harder than before. A massive gravitational wave rippled outward, shaking the entire region. The engineers were thrown back, their bodies spinning. Alarm lights flashed inside their helmets. Inside the command room, dozens of humans leaned forward, trying to track them. One engineer slammed into the side of the anchor beam, but quickly regained balance. Another spun uncontrollably until his suit engines fired and slowed him down. The third managed to grab the stabilizer housing and anchor himself. The Aurelians couldn't breathe. Their hearts pounded. They had never seen anyone face such danger, let alone survive it. But slowly, the gravitational field began to calm. The singularity stopped shaking. Its energy pattern turned steady. The tether lights on the screens inside the ship shifted from red to yellow, then finally to green. The stabilizer had worked. The mission was successful. The engineers, exhausted but steady, began to move back toward the airlock. Their breathing was heavy, their suits scratched, but their voices remained calm. When they entered the ship again, the humans welcomed them with relieved smiles. Some clapped softly. Some placed comforting hands on their shoulders. But the Aurelians, they couldn't hold back their emotions. They approached the returning engineers hesitantly, their eyes filled with gratitude and disbelief. One of them spoke with a trembling voice. "You risked everything," they said softly. "You fixed the problem even when the waves tried to push you away." A human engineer shook his head gently. "It wasn't everything," he said. "It was just what needed to be done." The Aurelians lowered their heads, touched deeply by the humility of those words. To them, this wasn't just a task. It was bravery they had never imagined. It was protection they never knew existed. It was kindness that reached across the star's dot as the humans checked their equipment and updated their readings. The Aurelians stood quietly nearby, watching them with growing respect. The stories they had heard about Deathworlders, fearful, frightening legends, were fading quickly. The reality standing before them was something entirely different. Humans weren't monsters. They were helpers. They were protectors. They were people who faced danger head-on, not because they were fearless, but because others needed safety. And slowly, the Aurelians began to understand the universe had sent them, the very beings they once feared, and those beings had saved them. The rescue fleet floated above the Aurelian world, and although the worst danger had passed, nobody felt safe yet. The humans were exhausted, their ships looked worn out, and the strange microsingularity still pulsed far away, dragging faint ripples across the darkness, like a quiet reminder that the job wasn't finished. Even though they had moved it away from the planet, the final step was the hardest. They had to lock it into a stable orbit so it wouldn't drift back or tear apart some other world in the future. Inside the main human ship, the atmosphere was tense. Every screen showed readings of gravity, magnetic fields, reactor output, and structural stability. The numbers kept shifting so fast that even experienced crew members had to double-check them before trusting they were correct. But nobody complained. Everyone knew what was at stake. The Aurelians had no way to handle a danger like this. If the humans didn't succeed, everything they had done so far would be wasted. One of the human crew members leaned over a console, trying to blink away the tiredness in her eyes. She had been awake almost 2 days straight, but still kept working. She whispered to herself that they couldn't give up now. Across the room, another crew member tried to adjust the graviton anchors. The anchors were strong, but even they were struggling to hold the unstable pull of the microsingularity. It felt like trying to hold a wild animal with a rope that frayed a little more every second. A soft alarm beeped across the room, making everyone look up. A wave of gravitational fluctuation rolled toward the fleet, so strong that the lights flickered. For a moment, everything in the ship shook. Tools rattled on shelves. Chairs slid half an inch across the floor. A few people grabbed onto whatever they could reach until the shaking stopped. Then silence followed, heavy and thick. Someone exhaled sharply. They all knew what that meant. If they didn't stabilize things soon, the microsingularity could break free again. And if it did, the damage would be worse than before because it had been pulled far from its original chaotic motion. Now it would swing unpredictably through space. The fleet commander looked around the room and explained the plan again, but in a calm voice so no one panicked. The human ships would form a wide arc behind the drifting microsingularity. They would coordinate their fusion drives and release controlled bursts of energy to guide it into a carefully calculated orbit. It was dangerous for many reasons. Too much energy, and it would speed up uncontrollably. Too little, and it would drop into a lower path that could pull it toward another system. It needed to be perfect, not close, not almost perfect, but exactly right. The crew nodded. They trusted the calculations. They trusted one another. And more importantly, they trusted that the Aurelians were counting on them. That trust alone fueled their determination more than any energy crystal or reactor ever could. Outside, beyond the windows, Aurelian ships hovered at a safe distance. They didn't dare come closer. Their hulls were delicate compared to human engineering, and their crews were not trained to handle intense gravitational pressure. Still, the Aurelians watched every human movement with silent respect. They had never seen another species risk so much simply to save strangers. The operation began slowly. Human ships adjusted their positions one by one, forming a giant curved wall of glowing engines. Each ship controlled the angle of its thrusters with tiny but precise movements. The microsingularity dripped with faint light, like a black pearl that swallowed the brightness around it. It tugged at every ship, almost teasing them with its unpredictable pull. The signal to start the energy burst sequence echoed through the human fleet. The engines fired at once. The space behind the ships lit up in streaks of pale light. The push hit the anomaly like a wave, nudging it gently but firmly. On the monitors, its path shifted by a tiny fraction, just enough to show they were on the right track. The humans cheered softly, but only for a moment. The next phase was even harder. They had to synchronize their drives perfectly. One ship firing too early or too late would throw everything off. The fleet commander spoke into the communication channel with a calm and steady tone, calling out countdowns, adjustments, and energy output levels. Each ship answered with short replies, confirming their status. Everyone could feel the pressure, yet there was no hesitation in any voice. Not one. They all understood the responsibility on their shoulders. A second wave of gravitational distortion swept across them. It came faster than expected, slamming into the hulls like an invisible force. For a second, the ships drifted off alignment. One ship's stabilizers flickered. Another lost external communications for a moment. But no one panicked. They had practiced for unpredictable events. Humans were used to surviving in harsh worlds, where the environment changed without warning. Their instincts kicked in naturally. The humans worked together, adjusting their positions again and bringing the formation back into place. Their engines fired in rhythm, and slowly, the micro-singularity responded. It shifted into the orbit the scientists had planned. But just when they thought it was almost stable, a sudden shockwave erupted from the anomaly. It was not dangerous in a violent way, but strong enough to strain their ships. The shockwave pushed several vessels farther out than intended dot inside the Aurelian ships. Many watched with wide eyes, worried that the humans might fail. They had never seen such energy, such unpredictable physics. Some Aurelians whispered nervously. Others held on to their seats. They knew they couldn't do anything to help. They could only hope the humans would pull through once again. The humans didn't back away. Instead, they increased their output, even though it risked overheating their engines. One ship broadcast an alert about rising reactor temperature, but the crew kept going. Another ship reported stress on its hull, and still they stayed in formation. One of the human crew members whispered that they had come too far to stop. Another reminded the team that countless lives were depending on them, not just the Aurelians, but any nearby world that could be damaged if the anomaly broke free. That reminder seemed to strengthen everyone's resolve. The engines flared again in perfect unity. This time, the movement of the micro-singularity smoothed out. It drifted into the planned path and stayed there, held steady by the balance of gravity, motion, and distance. Inside the main human ship, the readings finally settled into stable numbers. The screens turned from blinking orange warnings to calm green indicators. The crew stared at them for a moment, almost unable to believe it. The commander asked for confirmation from the other ships. Within seconds, the replies came in one after another indicating success across the fleet. They had done it. The tension inside the ship suddenly broke. Some people laughed with relief. Others leaned back in their seats, covering their faces with tired hands. A few simply stared out the window at the gentle glow of the anomaly, now resting in a safe orbit. It no longer looked like a threat. It looked more like a distant star, harmless and quiet. One crew member whispered that the galaxy would never know how close disaster had come. Another said it didn't matter. They hadn't done it for praise. They did it because no one else could. And more importantly, because it was the right thing to do. Outside, the Aurelian ships blinked their lights in a slow pattern of gratitude, one of their traditional ways of showing respect. The gesture made several humans smile softly. It felt good to be understood, even by a species so different from them. The humans were tired. Their ships were almost at their limit, and they would need repairs for weeks or even months. But none of that mattered today. What mattered was that a world had been saved. A species had been saved, and the galaxy now saw humans in a new light, They were not the frightening creatures rumored in stories. They were not the unpredictable forces described in legends. They were protectors. They were capable of standing between danger and those who couldn't stand for themselves. As the microsingularity drifted peacefully in its stable orbit, the human fleet finally allowed themselves to rest, knowing they had done something extraordinary, something that would be remembered far beyond the stars. When the humans finally finished their work, and the microsingularity rested safely in its new orbit, a strange quiet settled over the rescue fleet. It wasn't the quiet of fear or confusion. It was the quiet that comes after something huge has happened, after something that changes people forever. Inside the human ships, everyone felt the exhaustion deep in their bones. But beneath that tiredness, there was pride. Not loud pride, not the kind you shout about. It was the gentle kind, the feeling that comes when you know you did something that mattered, even if no one ever thanks you for it. But the humans didn't know yet that thanks were already on the way. Down on the Aurelian world, the atmosphere was completely different. For days they had lived with fear, unsure if their planet would survive. Every tremor of the ground, every flicker of their sky, reminded them that their home was fragile. They had seen worlds fall to disasters before, stories passed down through generations. They knew what it looked like when a star or a void storm took everything away. But this time, something different happened. A species they barely understood, one they had always been told to avoid, had stepped forward and changed the entire story. For years, other alien civilizations had whispered about humans. Some called Earth a death world, a planet too wild, too dangerous, too unpredictable. They said its creatures grew up fighting gravity, storms, pressure, poisonous jungles, violent oceans, and countless conditions no other world would tolerate. And because humans came from such a place, many believed humans must be the same, too tough, too risky, and too unpredictable to trust. The Aurelians had believed those stories too. Until now. When the microsingularity finally drifted into a safe orbit and the danger was gone, the Aurelian leaders called an emergency gathering. They wanted to speak to the humans, not with fear this time, but with gratitude. A communication signal was sent to the human fleet, but instead of a formal message, the Aurelians requested a live connection. They wanted the humans to see their faces. They wanted the humans to see their sincerity. And they wanted to show respect in the most direct way they knew. Inside the main human ship, the crew gathered around a large display screen. When the signal connected, the faces of the Aurelian leaders appeared. Their expressions were soft, filled with relief and something else, something that humans recognized instantly: respect. One of the Aurelians spoke in a calm, melodic voice. Even though the humans didn't understand the language directly, the translation software carried the emotion perfectly. The Aurelian thanked them for what they had done, not only for saving the planet, but for showing a truth the galaxy had forgotten. They explained that for years, the galaxy had feared humans because they didn't understand them. Other species had grown in gentle worlds, with predictable patterns and calm environments. They had no idea what it meant to live on a world like Earth. They didn't understand that surviving hardship didn't make a species dangerous, it made them strong, determined, and compassionate in ways that others could not imagine. The Aurelian leader admitted that when the humans first arrived, they were terrified. They were sure the humans had come to take advantage of their crisis, or even conquer them. But then they watched the humans risk their own lives, stand against impossible odds, and keep pushing even when their ships looked ready to collapse. And something changed in their hearts. The humans on the ship listened quietly. Some felt awkward receiving such praise. Others felt emotional, but tried not to show it. They weren't used to being honored like heroes. Most of the time, they worked in the background, fixing things that broke or exploring places no one else wanted to visit. Hearing another species speak with such warmth felt strange but comforting. Aurelian leader made one last statement that took everyone by surprise. They announced that they would broadcast a message to every allied world, correcting the old myths about humans. They would tell the galaxy that humans were not monsters or unpredictable threats. They were protectors. They were helpers. They were partners worth trusting. When the transmission ended, silence filled the human ship again. But this time, it felt different. The crew looked at one another with small smiles. The long hours, the shaking hulls, the bending metal, the exhaustion, it all suddenly felt worth it. A short time later, the Aurelians sent another message, this one inviting the humans to visit the surface of their world. They wanted to welcome them not as strangers from a dangerous planet, but as honored guests. At first the humans hesitated. Their bodies were stronger than most species, and their presence could feel intimidating without meaning to. But the Aurelians insisted. They wanted to show their gratitude properly. So a small human shuttle descended onto the Aurelian world. As it broke through the clouds, the humans saw the planet in a way they hadn't before. The stormy skies were clearing. The cracks in the land had stopped widening. Nature itself seemed to be breathing again. When the shuttle landed, a group of Aurelians waited outside. They approached slowly, not out of fear, but out of awe. Humans stepped out of the shuttle, their boots sinking lightly into the soft ground. For a moment, both sides simply looked at each other. No words were needed. Everything had already been said. One of the Aurelians stepped forward and held out a small glowing crystalline object that their culture used to symbolize trust. It was never given lightly. It represented a bond, a promise, and an open door for future friendship. The humans accepted it with gentle hands, understanding the weight of the gesture. The Aurelians then led them through a gathering area where more of their people waited. Some had tears in their eyes. Others simply lifted their hands in peaceful greetings. They welcomed the humans like family, and the humans tried their best to respond with equal kindness. Later, as the humans walked through the peaceful Aurelian environment, many of them felt a strange sense of connection. This world was so different from Earth, gentle, calm, almost delicate. But despite the differences, the two species found something in common: the desire to survive, to protect their home, and to help others when they could. By the time the humans returned to their ships, the relationship between the two species had changed forever. The Aurelians promised to speak on behalf of humans in the Galactic Council. They promised to challenge the fear and myths that had followed humans for so long. They also promised something: